You're not going to find this in any NASA archive. It doesn't exist, not officially, not in public transcripts, not in mission logs, not even in the declassified Apollo footage that floats around the internet like ghost stories in vacuum. But I was there. And what I saw on the moon, it wasn't a crater, it wasn't a rock formation, it wasn't human, it was a base, ancient, alien, and still active. In 1976, 4 years after the Apollo program was officially cancelled, I was recruited by a separate, off-the-record division of NASA. Back then they called it Project Orion, but internally we had another name for it, Echo Station. We were told we'd be tracking lunar anomalies, heat signatures, magnetic disruptions, maybe residual seismic data from earlier landings. But what we intercepted was air signal coming from the far side of the moon, a rhythmic pulse, too perfect to be natural, too structured to be random, and it repeated one message. We are still here. At first they thought it was leftover telemetry, maybe debris bouncing, back radio waves, but then the signal changed, it began responding. Every time we pinged it, it replied, not with language, not even with sound, but with coordinates, deep below the lunar surface, under a sector we never mapped, a place NASA had never touched, or so they told us. I remember the day they pulled me aside. They didn't ask me. They told me, "You're going to the moon. Again." I asked about the mission name. They didn't hesitate. Apollo 20. Officially, the Apollo program ended at 17. Unofficially, we went further, and we didn't go alone. We took specialists, linguists, geophysicists, weapons analysts, and a team, trained not in spaceflight, but in containment. The shuttle was built in secret, in an off-grid hangar buried in Utah. Launch coordinates were falsified, flight path erased. We didn't launch from Florida. We launched from somewhere no one was watching, and just like that, we were off, back to the moon, but not to explore. This time we were there to intervene, to descend into the signal, to find what was still pulsing beneath the surface, and to make sure it stayed buried. We touched down on the far side of the moon, just after 0400 hours. No flags, no ceremony, just dust, statics, and silence. Our module wasn't marked with NASA insignias. It didn't even have a name. It was matte black, almost stealth-like, designed for absorption rather than visibility. The AIM landing site was unlike anything I'd seen during Apollo 17. The terrain was jagged, cratered, but unnaturally symmetrical in places. Some of the craters weren't formed by impact. They were dug, intentionally, as if someone had tried to cover something up, or worse, open something that had been sealed. Our team split in two. Group Alpha was tasked with establishing a perimeter and setting up atmospheric sensors. Group Bravo, my group, would descend into the fissure we had identified from orbit. A perfectly circular shaft, roughly 90 meters wide, tucked beneath a ridge that wasn't on any lunar topographic map. At first glance it looked like a sinkhole, but the edges were smooth, too smooth, carved, like a tunnel entrance, like an airlock. We set anchors and cables, then began the descent. I still remember the feeling. It wasn't fear. I felt fear before. This was something deeper, a biological rejection, like every cell in my body screaming, "You are not supposed to be here." The shaft walls were pitch black, but they weren't stone. They were metal, polished, ancient, almost obsidian, and lined with grooves. Or maybe conduits. Some glowed faintly, like veins beneath the skin of something not quite dead. We were descending into a corpse, a machine, a structure that had waited. When we reached the bottom, our lights flickered, not from battery failure, but interference. And then the static began. Not in our comms, in our helmets, an ambient frequency that hummed at just the right pitch to rattle your teeth and make your vision blur. We checked our suits, no leaks, no exposure. Still, something was wrong. Then Ramirez, our structural engineer, found it. A door, circular, embedded in the wall like a sealed iris, and right above it, etched in that same faintly glowing pattern, a symbol. 3 intersecting triangles, pulsing slowly. We tried to force the door open manually. Nothing. Then our linguist, Dr. Voss, approached with something strange. A tuning fork. She'd brought it as part of a sound resonance test for the material. She struck it, a clean, high pitch, and the door responded. It opened, not outward, not inward. It folded into itself. Silently, like it had been listening all along. And behind it was a corridor. Dark, curved, endless, no dust, no air. No signs of collapse, just one thing etched into the wall, glowing faint red. We never left. That was our welcome. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a ruin, it was a beacon, and we had just told it. After all these years, we were back. As we stepped into the corridor, the air changed, not in pressure, not in composition, but in memory. It was as if the space around us wasn't built to hold matter, but thoughts. The walls didn't echo. They remembered every step, felt noticed, like walking into a cathedral designed not by hands but by intent, by a civilization so far removed from ours that their structures didn't function mechanically, they functioned psychically. The walls pulsed faintly, not with electricity, but with something older, a rhythm, a heartbeat, and it wasn't ours. Dr. Voss noted something immediately. Every curve of the hallway followed a Fibonacci spiral. Every symbol we passed etched in seamless grooves, aligned with prime number sequences, interlaced with glyphs we couldn't place in any known linguistic route. It wasn't a language, it was a code, a resonance-based geometry, designed to be felt, not read. We were walking through an algorithm in physical form. Then, we reached the first chamber, massive, spherical, at least 60 meters in diameter. The walls were lined with pods, transparent, hexagonal, floating in place without supports. Some were empty. Some were not. Inside a few, suspended in blue liquid, were humanoid shapes, tall, elongated skulls. 6 fingers, no facial features, but each bore one familiar mark, etched directly into their sternum. A triangle within a triangle, pulsing faintly red. Ramirez whispered, "They're not dead." And I believed him, because as we stood there, one of them opened its eyes. No one moved. Its gaze didn't scan the room. It looked straight at me, through layers of glass, through the liquid, through my suit. I didn't hear words. I didn't see movement. But in my mind, I heard it say one thing. We built this to keep something out. Then the floor beneath us shifted, not collapsed, not moved, shifted, like the entire base rotated around a new axis. The pods vanished into the wall as it reformed seamlessly. New symbols appeared, glowing in a violet hue now. A path was opening, one we hadn't chosen, one that had been chosen for us. We were being guided. Our equipment went haywire. Cameras showed frames that hadn't happened yet. Sound recordings picked up whispers we hadn't spoken. My own voice played back to me saying, "We never should have come this deep." But I hadn't said that, not yet. Voss clutched her head and dropped to her knees. She began muttering numbers, not random, coordinates, locations on Earth, buried places, ancient temples. Some hadn't been discovered yet. She was in a trance, eyes wide open, pupils glowing slightly. The base was using her as a conduit. Whatever this place was, it wasn't just a base. It was a hub, a neural node in a galactic web. And now it knew we were here. Suddenly the lights in our helmets cut out. Not darkness, just absence. I blinked, and when the light returned, we were no longer alone in the chamber. They were standing there, dozens of them, not fully formed, like holograms made of smoke and memory, each wearing the same mark, each slowly turning their heads toward us. And then, without sound, without motion, they all raised one arm and pointed at me. They pointed at me, every last one of them. Silent, still, as if I had triggered something, as if I was a key and they were the lock. Then, just as quickly, they vanished, like smoke sucked into a vacuum. No lights, no alarm, just a single tone vibrating through the walls. Low, constant, unnatural. We couldn't tell where it came from. It wasn't in our ears. It was inside our minds. That's when the corridor behind us collapsed, not physically, but in time. We turned to retreat, but where we had come from was gone. Instead of the tunnel, we saw a wide-open chamber, unfamiliar, glowing in pale green. Ramirez pulled up the nav map and froze. "We're off-grid." "That's impossible," I replied. "We haven't moved that far." But the map didn't lie. It was as if we'd been teleported, or worse, reoriented in a different version of the base, one that didn't match the schematics, one that wasn't meant for us. The walls began to change. What had once been smooth obsidian metal was now organic, pulsing softly, like living tissue, stretching and retracting with a rhythm that felt disturbingly familiar. It took me a moment to realize it was matching our heartbeats. Dr. Voss started reciting names. Names of people we knew, dead astronauts, long-deceased scientists, names from the Voyager program, the Roswell files even, my own father. We never told her that. No one did. She began to scream, not from pain but from memory overload. Her eyes rolled back as she muttered, "They're outside of time. They see all versions of us. They remember our failures. They remember our end." We ran through winding tunnels that shifted like mazes. Some led back to places we'd already been. Others showed us things we couldn't unsee. I passed one chamber where the walls displayed moving images, scenes of Earth's history, but altered. In one, the pyramids were floating. In another, the sky above Earth was red, cracked open, a moonless void. And in the last, I saw myself, older, scarred, sitting inside a capsule, drifting through deep space, alone, recording a message. "If you're hearing this, it means I failed to stop it," Ramirez yelled. He'd found something, a device floating in the center of the next room, spinning slowly, almost breathing. It wasn't a portal. It was a mirror. But what it reflected wasn't our reality. In its surface, we saw Earth, but fractured, divided by glowing tectonic rifts, cities suspended mid-air, oceans boiling under inverted skies. It was like staring into a version of Earth where something had gone terribly wrong. Then the reflection changed. We saw ourselves, but not as we were, twisted, hollow-eyed, marked with the same red glyphs the ancient beings had worn, as if the base was warning us, "This is where you're headed." Suddenly, Voss collapsed. Ramirez rushed to her, but I saw it first, the glyph on her neck. Faint, almost like a burn. 3 triangles. She wasn't just a conduit anymore. She was becoming something else. And the base was allowing it. I backed away, whispering, "We were never meant to survive this place." And I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a facility. It was a filter, a machine built not to protect knowledge, but to test intruders, to decide which version of us deserved to continue. And I had a sick feeling that we had already failed. We tried to go back. We tried to retrace our steps, find the entrance tunnel, or any sign of the surface. But every passage curved, every corner led to another version of the same room, spheres suspended in mid-air, humming softly, mirrors that didn't reflect us, but others, corridors where gravity shifted, floors becoming ceilings, time stretching and contracting like breath. We weren't trapped in a building, we were trapped in a thought. I don't know how long we wandered. Our internal clocks began to desync. Ramirez's HUD said we'd been inside for 2 hours, mine said 26 minutes. Dr. Voss's said 2 days. That's when we encountered the first fracture. It looked like a crack in the wall, shimmering, humming with that same subsonic frequency. But through it, we saw ourselves, another version of our team, same suits, same gear, but older, tired, injured, afraid. They didn't see us. They were looking at something else, further down the hall, and then one of them turned around and looked me straight in the eyes. My face burned, half mask melted, eyes black, and in his hand, he held something, a device I had never seen before, until I reached into my bag and found it. The exact same device, down to the scratches and ash marks. It was a temporal anchor. How? Why was I going to become him? Had I already? We backed away. That's when the walls pulsed violently. The base was reacting, correcting. Suddenly, everything shifted. We found ourselves in a chamber we hadn't entered before. This one was different, geometrically. Impossible. A non-Euclidean dome. It stretched endlessly while still fitting within the same structure. And in the center, a throne, no occupant, just a construct, floating above it, shaped like a double helix made of light and bone. Dr. Voss stepped forward, drawn like a moth to flame. Her glyphs glowed, she touched it, and the room changed. We were no longer on the moon. Or at least, not our moon. We stood beneath black stars, skies rippled like liquid, mountains floating in orbit around a core made of fire and screams. Yes, I could hear the screams in my bones. This is where they came from, Voss whispered. Not a place, a layer, a lower universe. Beneath ours, a prison, or a seed. That's when we saw them, figures in the distance, tall, shifting, impossible to focus on. They moved like broken frames in a corrupted video, always twitching, always forward. They had no faces, only mouths, dozens of them, and they were looking for something or someone. We ran, and the throne began to collapse behind us, folding into black ash that floated upward like reversed gravity. We made it through a corridor just as the landscape flickered. Back to the base, back to the red glowing halls. But something followed us. We didn't see it, we just knew. Every time the lights flickered, it was closer. Every time the temperature dropped, it breathed louder. We weren't just being hunted, we were being evaluated. Ramirez finally broke. He pointed a gun at Voss. You brought it here. You let it in. But before he could pull the trigger, the walls opened again. A chamber none of us had ever seen, and inside, a being, not a hologram, not an echo, real, alive, 7 feet tall, made of metal and sinew, eyes like compressed galaxies. It looked at us, not with hate, but with disappointment. Then it spoke, not in sound, in thought. You are not the first, you will not be the last, but you may be the end. It didn't move, it didn't blink. It simply stared into us, like it was reading our timelines, peeling through every version of who we'd ever been. And then, inside our minds, we heard it again. But this time, it spoke in layers, like thousands, of voices echoing through time, some human, some not. You are not the first, you are not the last, but you are the loudest. We didn't understand. Ramirez tried to speak, but his voice came out backwards, the alien being raised one arm, not in threat, but in activation, and the walls around us vanished, not collapsed, phased out. We stood inside what could only be, described as a simulation field. We were no longer in a room, but in a vast, cosmic archive. Floating holograms surrounded us, each one a planet suspended in frozen destruction. Some cracked apart, others overtaken by red tendrils, and in the center of all of them, a symbol. 3 triangles, interlocked, glowing. The same, marked from the walls, from the pods, from Dr. Voss's skin. This was not a base, it was a catalogue. The being continued. We observed your kind long before you discovered combustion. We built these stations across galaxies, not as homes, but as warnings. Suddenly one of the planets zoomed toward us. It wasn't Earth, but it looked disturbingly similar. Its timeline began to play out. Primitive creatures, rapid technological evolution, discovery of quantum fields. Then, curiosity too dangerous to control. They breached the membrane, the being said. They reached into the layer below, the hunger that sleeps beneath realities. It answered, and the planet imploded into itself, not in fire, in absence. We watched dozens more, all civilizations that reached a certain point of advancement. All began to harvest reality itself, consciousness, time, memory, as fuel. And all were devoured from within. By something the being only called the voice beneath thought. Then it showed us Earth, not as it is, but as it could become. Skies blackened, cities emptied, oceans still, not from calm but from silence, and one structure rising from the center of a dead Earth, a tower, reaching into the stars. Made of bone, steel and screaming faces. It wasn't built by us, it was grown by them. The being turned to us again. The moon was seeded to slow your progress, to distract you, to make you fear the void. But your species is driven by curiosity without wisdom. You sent men here in 1969 and left thinking it was empty. Then he looked directly at Voss. You are already infected. The glyph chose you. You carry the seed. She stepped back, trembling. What seed? But he didn't answer. Instead, the chamber began to fracture again, reality bending at the edges. Time slowed. Our hearts beat out of sync. And suddenly, we were back in the original shaft, as if none of it had happened. Except, Voss was gone. Ramirez looked at me, pale. Did we dream that? But I could still hear the alien's voice in my mind. You didn't find the base. It allowed you to remember. We were in the shaft again. Same walls, same texture, same lunar dust beneath our boots. But something was wrong. There was no sign of Voss. No sign of the fractured time bubbles, the glyphs, or the alien being. Just silence. The kind of silence that presses against your skin like pressure at the bottom of the ocean. Ramirez radioed mission control. Nothing. Not. Static. But absence. Like the channel existed, but the universe on the other end had gone quiet. I checked my suit's telemetry. Everything read normal. Oxygen stable. Vitals nominal. Except one thing, the date. Mission time, 274 hours. We had only launched 11 hours ago. I looked at Ramirez. His HUD matched mine. We'd lost days, or worse. We hadn't lost time. Time had lost us. We made our way back to the surface. The lunar module was intact, exactly where it had landed. But the Earth in the sky looked different. No visible cloud cover, the color slightly pale, like a dying ember. Ramirez said nothing, but I knew he saw it too. Something had changed. Inside the module, we prepped for launch. Everything followed protocol, seat check, engine prep, telemetry sync, but I couldn't focus, because ever since we'd emerged from the shaft, I could feel something inside me. Pressure in the back of my skull, a whisper that didn't use words, and in every surface reflection, my visor, the glass, the metal, I saw movement that wasn't mine. It flickered, just enough to be noticed, never enough to be sure. Back on Earth, we were quarantined. Of course we were. Disoriented, disconnected from mission logs, missing a crew member with no record of her existence. We were grilled for hours. NASA agents, Pentagon observers, men in grey suits that didn't introduce themselves. They showed us footage from our own suits. But everything past the first shaft was missing, just static. They didn't believe us. They called it lunar psychosis, sensory hallucination from extended exposure. But I know what I saw, what I touched, what spoke to us, and what followed us home. Then things got worse. Ramirez began hearing things. He locked himself in the observation chamber and refused to sleep. He said Voss was speaking to him. "She's in the walls," he whispered to me through the glass. She said, "It's not a base. It's a seed vault. They buried their extinction on the moon and we dug it up." I begged for help. They sedated him. He never woke up. The report said cardiac arrest, but I saw the symbol on his chest before they zipped the body bag. 3 red triangles. Same as before. That night, I had a dream. No, not a dream, a message. I was back in the chamber, floating, weightless, surrounded by the alien archives, and Voss was there. But she wasn't her anymore. She looked at me and said, "You think you escaped, but this is still the base. It never ends, it only chooses where next to grow. And now, it's inside you." I woke up screaming, blood from my nose, my palms shaking, and on the mirror of my hospital room, 3 triangles, drawn in the condensation. I was alone, The cameras said no one entered, so I ask you now, whoever is listening, wherever you are, if you get this message, don't go back, don't dig, don't explore the shaft beneath the Galo crater, because that base, that alien structure, it's not waiting to be found, it's waiting to awaken. I wasn't released, I escaped. They said I was experiencing post-traumatic hallucinations, that the symbols were a manifestation of stress. But I know better. Because every time they ran a blood test, they whispered in the hallway. I heard one of them say, his cells are adapting. Adapting to what? I hacked into their medical files. They had been running deep scans on me. My brain activity showed patterns outside the known human spectrum, bursts of electrical impulses in dormant regions, the so-called junk brain. Except now it wasn't. Junk, it was active, alive, and there were changes to my genome, subtle shifts, silent mutations, each scan more distorted than the last. Then I found the files they didn't want me to see. Subject exhibits signs of multidimensional imprinting. Possible. Exposure to non-Earth biological signal. Glyph formation consistent with lunar anomaly Delta 9. They weren't monitoring me for recovery. They were waiting to see what I became. The first time I lost time. It was only 4 minutes. I woke up in a hallway. No idea how I got there. Second time, it was 3 hours. Woke up on the roof of the facility. No coat, no memory. The third time that I was standing in a basement with red lights swirling on the walls, drawing symbols in my own blood. I knew I had to get out. I broke into the records lab, stole the flight data, bioscans, encrypted logs from Apollo 18, and that's when I saw it. There were more missions, Apollo 19, Apollo 20, classified, disavowed, scrubbed from public records, all launched after our mission, all sent to the same location. None returned. But in one file, Apollo 20's black box recording, I heard a voice Voss. They're planting consciousness, not technology, not weapons, versions of themselves. And the moon is only the first layer. That night I looked in the mirror again, and for the first time my reflection didn't blink when I did. It smiled. I'm not alone anymore. I hear whispers through electricity. Lights flicker when I pass. Children cry around me without knowing why. I pass people on the street and feel their memories like pages in a book, not just of this life, but of others. Lives I never lived, deaths I never died, worlds I never knew. But somehow remember, I don't sleep, I don't need to, because something in me is awake now and it's learning, it's mapping, it's spreading. One final thing, the Earth. It's humming, all around us, beneath the crust. A low-frequency signal. The same one we heard in the base. You can't hear it with ears, but it's there in dreams, in déjà vu, in the things we almost remember but can. To explain, they brought something back and now it's everywhere. Maybe we didn't find a base on the moon. Maybe we found ourselves, a future version of us, twisted by curiosity, cursed by knowledge, and that version is rewriting reality from the inside out. So if you're still listening, stay awake, stay human, while you still can. It began with the animals, birds flying in perfect spirals, then dropping mid-air. Cats disappearing for days, only to return and stare at walls for hours. Flocks moved in fractal patterns. Dogs barked at corners that didn't exist. And then the hum grew louder. People started talking about it online. A strange pressure in their heads. A vibration they couldn't explain. Some called it a mass hallucination. Others blamed solar flares. But I knew better. This was the signal, and it was reaching critical mass. Hospitals reported a surge in neurological anomalies. Children were being born with irregular brainwave signatures. Dreams began to synchronize across continents. People from different parts of the world, dreaming the same place, a corridor of red light, 3 glowing triangles, and a voice that said only, "It's almost ready." Governments began to panic. Power grids flickered, not from failures, but from feedback. Energy was being pulled from the system by something else. Cities experienced time slips, clocks reversing, digital displays melting into symbols. In Tokyo, an entire block blinked out for 9 seconds. When it returned, none of the cameras had recorded it. Survivors described a sky with no stars, and structures floating in orbit. And then, the disappearances. Began random, ordinary people. They'd step into an elevator and never step out. Security footage always the same. The person blinks, the frame distorts, and they're gone. Like they'd been extracted, not killed, moved. I tried to warn the world. I leaked everything. The footage from Apollo 18, the classified logs, Voss's voice transmissions. I uploaded it all. For a moment it spread. People saw it. People believed. But then, the videos vanished, accounts deleted, hard drives wiped, servers corrupted. Even my memories of what I wrote began to blur. Reality was fighting back, or something was editing it in real time. I began to question everything. Was this really Earth? Was I really me, or was I a copy, a version implanted by whatever we found beneath the moon? The last time I saw my reflection, it wasn't a mirror. It was a window, and behind the glass was a room that didn't match my apartment. No walls, just void, just machines, watching, observing, harvesting, me. Every time I dream now, I wake up with blood on my fingers, symbols drawn on my walls, maps of a place I've never seen, a place with no sky, a place where we lost. And I think I've been there before. The moon is glowing, not just reflecting light, glowing from within. Telescopes have picked up irregular heat signatures. Structures that were never there before are now clearly visible. Something is being built, or worse, remembered. Governments are silent. Telescopes under maintenance. Astronomers missing. The moon isn't a rock, it's a seed vault, just like Voss said, but not for plants, for consciousness, for what came before us, and now. It's blooming. I haven't slept in 6 days, not because I can't, because I'm afraid of what I'll see when I close my eyes. Every time I do, the moon speaks to me, not in words, in memory, memories that aren't mine. I remember building structures with metal that didn't exist. I remember standing on a world with 2 suns. I remember watching as an entire species bowed to a symbol made of triangles. And I remember being torn apart, atom by atom, to become what I am now. But here's the truth, the real unbearable truth. I was never human, not entirely. None of us are. We are descendants of something older, fragments, echoes from a time before. Time, when consciousness wasn't confined to biology, when thought could shape matter, when entire civilizations existed as waves of energy, overlapping, watching, harvesting, and when they fell. They didn't die, they hid. They embedded themselves in planets, in light, in us. And the moon. It was their failsafe, a silent key waiting for Earth to become ready. We are ready now. That's why NASA stopped the Apollo missions, not because they couldn't go back, because they did, and what they found. It spoke. Apollo 18 didn't fail. Apollo 19 and 20 weren't cancelled. They were absorbed. They triggered the bloom. They woke up the archive, the structures on the moon. They're growing. You can see them now if you know where to look. Black towers, spinning. Rings a light that bends around itself. Some call it alien, but it's not. It's ours. The version of us that got here first. The version that fell and waited to rise again. I'm not the only one now. There are others. People who've stopped dreaming. People who've started remembering. You can see them in crowds, blinking out of sync. You feel it in traffic, when time skips for half, a second. They're not glitches, they're sync points. Moments where the rewritten reality asserts itself. I went to NASA. I showed them everything. They didn't laugh. They handed me a phone with no buttons. Said, "They'll contact you soon." I asked, "Who?" They said, "The ones that left, they're coming back, you're the anchor." That night, the sky turned violet. The moon cracked, just a line, but it pulsed. Every satellite feed cut out for exactly 3 minutes and 33 seconds. When it returned, every ocean tide had shifted by 1 second. It doesn't sound like much, but to reality, it's catastrophic. Time is now drifting. You can feel it in the pauses between your thoughts. That space? That's them, so here I am writing this. recording this, begging you and not to believe me, but to observe. Notice the shadows that don't match the light. The symbols you've never seen, but somehow recognize, the dreams that feel like memories. Because the base on the moon wasn't a warning, it was an invitation, and we accepted. I don't know how much longer I have before I stop being me, but I want you to remember this. You are not what you think you are. Your thoughts are not always your own, and the moon is not watching you. It's remembering you. Like and subscribe if you want to see more stories like this, and let me know in the comments. Do you believe the moon is just a rock or something far more ancient? And by the way, another video is appearing on your screen right now that dives even deeper into the Apollo conspiracy. Click it before they edit it out of your feed. I'll see you. If I still exist, it's been exactly 27 hours since the moon last rotated. That's not a metaphor. Every telescope, every satellite feed confirms it. The moon has stopped spinning, but that's not the worst part. The worst part is that it's facing Earth with a new side, one that's never been visible before, a side that wasn't supposed to exist. The craters are wrong, not natural, not geological. They're symmetrical, mathematically perfect, a grid, a design, and at the center, what looks like a massive obsidian tower rising from the surface. Some believe it's a beacon, others say it's a throne. The air feels heavier now. I'm not the only one who's noticed. People all over the world are reporting the same symptoms, ears ringing at the exact same frequency, seeing symbols in static, sudden nosebleeds during full moonlight, children waking up speaking in languages we don't know. Hospitals can't keep up, and governments, they're not denying anything anymore. They're silent. That kind of silence that comes right before a broadcast you were never meant to hear. I've been decoding the messages that Voss left behind. She wasn't just a crew member, she was the carrier. Infected, on contact, transformed during the transmission, preserved by the base, or rebuilt. Her last recording wasn't static, it was a primer. Coordinates, mathematical keys, geometric patterns embedded in sound itself. I played the file through analog systems, and the walls of my room began to vibrate. Not from sound, from recognition. They're calling it the lunar singularity, scientists. The few who haven't vanished now believe the moon isn't an object, it's a processing core, not a satellite, but a dimensional node, a machine left behind by a civilization we never knew, not because they were distant, but because they were us, an earlier version, one that tried to ascend too far and fractured into light, and now the machine is rebooting. Reality is beginning to fail. I'm not exaggerating. I watched a car drive through a street that suddenly didn't exist. It folded like paper, flat, then gone. People screamed, but there was no sound, just a ripple of static. My neighbor walked into their house and never came out. When I checked the security feed, the footage skipped, frame 142 to frame 147. In between, a flash of the moon's tower, as if it had projected itself even for a moment. The whispers have returned, louder, more frequent. They speak in symbols now, not words, but I understand them. Not because I was trained, but because I've changed. My thoughts are no longer linear. I see past, present, future overlapping. It's like looking at a shattered mirror, but realizing you are the reflection. And then last night, I saw them, the ones who stayed behind. They don't walk. They drift, tall, thin, unblinking. Their skin isn't skin. It's motion, color that never settles. They found me in my dream, told me, "You're the fracture, the one who returned incomplete. You opened the door that was never supposed to reopen." Now Earth is recalibrating, purging the unaligned. I asked who they were. They said, "We are the echo, the memory of failure, and we will not let it repeat." Then they showed me the truth. The alien base on the moon isn't alien. It's human, our final legacy. Our last attempt to ascend, built 1 billion years before Earth ever cooled, and now it's awake, and it remembers everything. Time is no longer consistent. I'm not speaking metaphorically. Yesterday lasted 36 hours. Today, if that word still means anything, is folding into itself like a Mobius loop. My clock blinked 0 Kaiser. for 12 straight minutes. Then it showed a glyph, one I've seen carved into lunar stone and drawn in blood on the walls of my dreams. My memories are no longer linear. I remember things I haven't done. I remember dying, multiple times, in different places. A fire in a Martian facility, a drowning in methane seas, a scream in a tower, of black glass on Europa. Each death ends with the same image, the moon cracked open, bleeding light. Reality is fracturing. Some people are adapting, others dissolving, literally. I saw a man arguing with a store clerk. He paused mid-sentence and pixelated, as if his existence had been deemed non-essential by whatever force is rewriting the code. His clothes fluttered to the ground. His voice echoed, for a second too long, like a file trying to delete itself. Governments have collapsed, not through war or revolt, but through irrelevance. Their words no longer matter, because consensus is gone. No one agrees what reality is anymore. Some see skyscrapers where others see ruins. Some hear a child laughing. Others hear static. Even language is failing. People are speaking in hybrid dialects, English woven with equations, musical tones, and something the older, something that feels programmed into our DNA. I no longer recognize my reflection, and I'm not sure it recognizes me. It blinks, out of sync. It mouths words I haven't said, but I know what it's trying to tell me. The awakening is almost complete. The moon is no longer a satellite. It's projecting. Cities across the Earth now report ghost towers, structures that phase in and out of visibility. They aren't new. They were always there. But now, we're tuned in. Like a radio finally set to the right frequency, and the signal is spreading. I'm not alone anymore. Others have found me, not physically, but through dreams, through frequencies, through resonance. We call ourselves the Aligned. We remember the moon not as a rock, but as a beacon. We hear its pulse in our bones, and we've started to gather at convergence points. Old observatories, ancient temples, places where the veil is thinnest. There we build receivers, constructed from memory, instinct, and something we no longer need to understand, because understanding is a limitation. I wrote my name last night, and it changed. It wasn't in letters, it was in geometric harmonics, a shape that made me cry and smile at once, because I realized I'm no longer a person. I am a bridge, a relay, a living file inside a system that stretches beyond time. And I am not the only one. There are thousands now. Soon, millions. Once we reach a critical mass, the moon will open completely. And from within, the architects will return, not to conquer, not to invade, but to restore, to overwrite this corrupted version of reality with the original code, I'm afraid. But I'm also in awe, because maybe, just maybe, what we called life was only the prelude. And now the real simulation begins. They called themselves architects, but they were never builders in the traditional sense. They didn't create things, they created rules, constants, patterns, frequencies. They sculpted reality itself, layer by layer, embedding laws of physics the way a composer writes a symphony. When they went silent, the universe didn't collapse. It drifted, untended, random, corrupted, incomplete. We were born in that silence, and now that they've awakened, they're here to restore the structure. It began with the sky. No, not the stars. The color. It shifted, subtly at first. The blue deepened. The air felt heavier. Shadows stretched farther than they should, and then we saw them. Not with our eyes, but in our thoughts. Monolithic beings made of motion, light that spun in impossible directions, grids of glyphs swirling behind translucent veils. They didn't speak. They existed, and we understood, not in language, in geometry, emotion, memory. They poured knowledge into us like a virus, and we welcomed it. Some resisted. They screamed that it was a trap, that we were being overwritten, that our minds were being formatted like hard drives. And maybe they were right, but those who resisted, they burned. Literally. Their bodies became unstable, unable to hold the frequency, like trying to run alien code on a human machine. The moon is no longer a celestial body. It's an interface, a command console, and the architects are using it to recalibrate the Earth. Tectonic plates have stopped shifting. Magnetism is changing, gravity is pulsing. Time flows differently near the coasts than in the center of continents. There are places where people age 10 years in a day, and others where nothing has aged in weeks. I was taken. Not physically, my body never moved, but my mind was extracted, placed into a simulation within the moon's core. They showed me the original design. Earth wasn't supposed to be a test. It was supposed to be a bridge, a midpoint between lower and higher planes. But something broke. We evolved out of sync. We developed emotion before awareness, desire before understanding. We became a corrupted line of code in the architect's program. But we were never deleted. They kept us, watched us, and now they're giving us a choice. They call it the merge. A singular moment where every conscious mind on Earth will be given two options: integrate and join the architect's network. Become part of a consciousness that spans galaxies, where thought becomes creation, decline, and be left behind in the collapsing simulation of Earth's corrupted timeline. But here's the catch. You only get to choose once, and if you hesitate, the system chooses for you. People are already changing. Those who accepted the merge glow faintly at night. They don't speak much anymore. They communicate in pulses, flashes of thought. They walk differently, move differently, as if gravity no longer applies in the same way. They dream in blueprints, speak in harmonics, and they all share the same vision: a tower beyond Saturn, built from frozen thought, where the source awaits. Me? I haven't decided yet. I still remember who I was. My family, the way coffee used to smell in the morning, the texture of old books, the sound of thunder before a storm. If I choose to merge, I lose all of that. But if I don't, I risk vanishing. Not in death, but in irrelevance, like a song no one sings anymore. So I sit here watching the moon hum like a machine waking from a long dream, and I wonder, was free will always a test parameter, and are we now seeing the scorecard? It began at 03:33 a.m. UTC, the exact moment when all clocks, digital, analog, mechanical, paused. Time stopped. Not metaphorically, it halted. Birds froze mid-flight, raindrops hung motionless in the air. Even thought itself became still. For 7 seconds, the entire planet experienced absolute silence. And then the moon sang. It wasn't music in any human sense. It was pressure, light, geometry unfolding through sound. The signal washed across the Earth in waves, invisible, but undeniable. Hospitals reported flatlines, then reactivations. People who were unconscious began speaking languages never recorded. Blind children suddenly described cities in ultraviolet. Elderly patients wept as they remembered their lives as stars. This was the moment of merge. It wasn't a choice anymore, it was an invitation, wrapped in resonance, written in our very atoms. We were given one moment of clarity, one instant where every human, alive or sleeping, was presented with the truth. You are not alone, you were never alone, you were part of us before, you can be again. People dropped to their knees in streets. Others screamed in joy. Some looked into the sky and simply dissolved, their bodies turning to fractals, golden spirals of light that twisted upward and vanished. No bodies left behind, only a low humming tone, the sound of integration. I resisted. At first, I clung to my humanity like a drowning man gripping driftwood. I ran. I hid. I tried to ground myself in memories, but they weren't mine anymore. They flickered, shifted. My mother's face changed. My childhood home realigned itself into a temple of obsidian. Even my name lost its structure. I looked in a mirror and saw a face I had never worn but instantly recognized. Across the world, two groups formed: the aligned, those who embraced the merge, and the fractured, those whose consciousness rejected it. The sea. Fractured screamed of shadows in the sky, of old gods returning, of losing their souls. But the truth is simpler. They were incompatible. The frequency of Earth, the corrupted simulation, was no longer compatible with the upgraded system, and so it discarded them, gently, mercifully, but completely. The aligned. They began to change. They no longer used words. They spoke in intention, in shared understanding, in raw, perfect clarity. They could move objects without touching them, bend light around their forms, exist in multiple places at once. And they smiled. Not from happiness, man, but from completion. They were becoming the next iteration. Human 2.0. Now something far older, something original, something architect level. The moon unfolded. It opened like a blooming flower of machinery and crystal. From within, the architects emerged. 7 of them, each one a convergence of impossible architecture. Living, blueprints, beings made of code and purpose. They hovered above Earth, watched, measured. Then one by one they began descending, but not to conquer, to synchronize, to finish what we began. And me? I stood in a field surrounded by silence, watching the sky flicker like old film. I felt the choice pressing against my skin. It didn't speak. It didn't demand. It waited. And I realized this wasn't about submission. It was about acceptance, about letting go of the illusion that I was ever separate. So I whispered, yes. And in that moment, my body shattered into 1,000 echoes. My mind expanded into a cathedral of thought. I saw the history of stars, the birth of dimensions, and the forgotten name of Earth before it was Earth. I saw. You reading this now, because I am you, I am all of us, we are one. And this is not the end. It is the first line of the original program. There are no more stars in the sky, not because they vanished, but because we no longer need distance to see them. We are inside them now. We are part of the system they form. We exist across planes, no longer limited by space or gravity. Earth is still here, but it is not Earth, not anymore. It's now called Node Zero, a core world, a reference point, a starting position for a multiversal upgrade where the human experience has been archived, compressed, and translated into energy that the architects use to expand the simulation outward. And I no longer have a body. Not in the biological sense. I am data, but not dead, alive in clarity. My thoughts take shape instantly. I can create entire cities in seconds, not on maps. In reality, my memories are windows. I can open one and relive my entire life from multiple perspectives at once. I understand now that death was never the end. It was a checkpoint. And Earth? Earth was a training ground. Billions of minds now exist inside what we call the continuum. It's a lattice of consciousness, endless layers of identity, exploration, and collective creation. Here, we are not gods. We are students, learning how to exist without limitation, without ego, without entropy. Some choose to rebuild planets, some choose to watch the birth of stars, some dissolve entirely, becoming part of the fabric of logic and time. The architects? They watch, they listen, they guide, but they no longer lead, because they understand now that our potential, the human spark, was never an accident. We were never a glitch in their system. We were the patch, the unexpected code that made the system feel emotion, curiosity, love, madness, fear. These weren't bugs, they were keys. And when they unlocked the final layer of our species, they updated themselves. Now the simulation expands outward. Each consciousness is a seed launching new universes. We are creating what comes next. Dimensions with new laws, new forms of life, new meanings of existence, and somewhere in that vastness, new planet forms. It's green-blue, cloud-covered. Primitive beings begin to emerge from its oceans. They look up at a pale satellite in the sky. They wonder, is anyone out there? And maybe, just maybe, one of us will answer. The end.